Good day to you all, and it is certainly great to have you guys here. I know we've got people joining from different parts of the world, and today we're very lucky to have Kashif Nanan. He is a very active member of SEMA CGMA and based in the Middle East as well. So before I hand over to Kashif and we have an interactive session, let me introduce myself and the company. My name is Angie Dialves. I'm the Managing Director of Ultimate Access. And I'm also a fellow member of SEMA as well as CP Australia. I'm also a council member of SEMA and a chairperson of CP Australia Ethics Committee. So I'm delighted to have this session with people from different parts of the world. It is a very, very exciting case study, and we will be touching on a lot of new things, a lot of very relevant things to all of us. And when I had a chat with Kashif about this, because of his extensive experience in the logistics industry, he also said, well, I'm happy to have a webinar with you and give back to our society here, which is the CGMA community. And with that, I didn't hesitate. I got hold of Kashif and then we started this webinar. You didn't have much time, Kashif, but of course, being very immersive in this industry and also being a very active member, I think you also remember what you have studied and how relevant it became in your profession and what you're doing right now. So with that, I want to, before we start off with the Q&A session, I want to get you to introduce yourself to all our team here. Thank you. Over to you, Kashif.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much, Anju. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe even good evening to some of you, depending on where you are in this world. It's a pleasure to be here. And, like Anju mentioned, she mentioned to me that the case study examination this time around is logistics focused, and it's brilliant. So let me introduce myself. My name is Kashif. I've been in and around logistics for 17 years. So I started with TNT in the UK in finance. And from there, it's been a bit of a journey. So in the UK first, then I moved to Netherlands to Dubai. While I was in Dubai, I had an opportunity to go to South Africa and look after the African countries. Then I did a 2-year stint just traveling US, Europe, APAC, as we did finance transformation in FedEx. So TNT was acquired by FedEx in 2016, so we sort of merged into them. And then over the past 2 years, I've been in Saudi Arabia as the country manager for FedEx. So almost did the switch, from finance over to more operations and sales and customer service and all aspects. So that's from a professional qualification, an experience perspective. From an exam perspective or qualification, so I'm a SEMA CGMA accountant. I sat the May 2010 SEMA case study examination. Unfortunately, it wasn't on logistics. It was more on fast fashion, so more like retail and Zara. And then it was great. I really enjoyed it. I think it was the first time we could sit an exam on computer, so we could actually type rather than write. So that was really good. I enjoyed that part. And then after that, I did my master's in University of Hertfordshire in business and management, qualified project manager as well. And so that basically leads us on to here. So I've been in the industry for 17 years, qualified accountant. I went through the case study myself, and really my goal over here is to try and provide as many real life examples as I can related to the case study. So day stroke in Roundland, the business, the risks, the issues that you experience, the KPIs, how you measure performance, and really the value is going to be from the questions that come. So Anju, I'm sure we'll ask a lot of questions, but please feel free to ask the questions that you have in your mind. a bit about me, Anju. I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, Kashif. So I'm going to start off with, just reminding the people who are doing the exam, we are focusing on the E3 strategy, P3, the risk, and then we're going into the F3, the all important finance, right? So one of the things, Kashif, that is certainly a game changer in our profession and across the world is IT, right? Information technology and the IT strategy and everything that revolves around that, which changed our profession as well as, of course, the businesses that we are in, whether it's logistics, or anything else. So I want you to give us an example of the IT transformation, the IT strategy, the cyber risks that you experience at FedEx, as well as then relating it to Dicestruck, because I know that you've gone through the case study. So you can kind of think, well, this is how large the company is. If we are to go from X to X plus, what do we need to do? Over to you.
Yeah, indeed. So maybe let's start off like if you look at the numbers of Daystruck, I think they got 22,000 employees, 7,000 drivers. They're one of the largest players in the country, Roundland. Now, this is a large company. It's not a small company, and being a large company, they have to have good IT systems that can do majority of the work. You can't be just doing things manually. You'd lose track of everything. So no doubt about it, it's a big company and it has to have IT systems. Now, I want to put it a little bit into context as well. So 22,000 employees, they're a domestic large company. They're not an international large company. So if you look at a FedEx or a DHL, FedEx globally has 500,000 employees. I think DHL has 400,000 employees. So it's a very large domestic player, but internationally not that big so far. It's probably still 5 or 10% of the big logistic players that you would say. So regardless, they need IT systems and they would be heavily dependent on the IT system. So if they're managing a warehouse, you need to know exactly where a product is. You need to know if something was moved. So you'd use scanning devices. If something is moving from A to B, or you need to know like, okay, was it loaded in the vehicle? Was it offloaded? Was it damaged anywhere? What time was it picked up? What time it was delivered? So everything is dependent on the IT systems. So, you read the risks that are presented for Daystruck. And again, IT is always a risk for all companies, for SMEs, for large companies. I want to give a real life example of something that we experienced in 2017, I believe, in TNT. So I was working for TNT Express. I was the head of finance for 6 countries in Africa and in Egypt one day. And all of a sudden, the emails stopped working on the phone. So nothing's coming through. I was quite happy, actually. Normally I get a lot of emails, so I was quite happy that emails have stopped. But then after like 3 or 4 hours, you realize something's not right. We're not getting any emails. So tried to log on to the PC. It didn't work. We're effectively, locked out. And it almost, you have to make a few phone calls, like what's happening? And people are like, no, mine's down as well. It's not working. And it took us maybe 1 or 2 days to realize that the whole TNT network globally has been hacked. It's basically being infected by the non-Petya virus. If you remember, I think it originated from Ukraine. Apparently, it originated from an accounting software that was installed in one of the laptops in Ukraine. And then from there, it really went around. And it effectively shut down our business. We couldn't do anything. I mean, you can imagine a customer calling saying, where's my shipment? And we're saying, well, we don't know. I don't know where it is. I can't even log on to my computer. I don't know who to call. I don't know if it's in Dubai, if it's in South Africa, Egypt. What's your account number? I don't know who you are. So we had one of the most extreme examples of a hack. Now, what we realized was it took us about, again, as I said, like 2, 3, 4 days to begin some form of communication. And what we did is we used WhatsApp. So we created groups. We started talking to our teams in groups, and everyone had different groups. So an operations team would have their own, and finance teams would have their own, customer service would have their own. And that's effectively what we worked on. Now, the IT systems in the background, they were working on restoring everything because they did have like backups that were off-site and not connected. But that takes a long time. It took us probably 4 to 8 weeks, so almost 1 to 2 months, to be able to get our networks back, to be able to get our access. Our emails went away unless we had, created archives. So it took a really long time. The net impact of it, initially within a year, we probably lost around 40% of our global revenues. That's 40% of our global revenues. And even then, when we tried to win those customers back, we were still about 30% down. And that was a huge impact. I mean, TNT had been acquired by FedEx at that time, but if it had not been, it was probably going to be the downfall of TNT Express, that attack. So yeah, that's a real life example. So, and one of the reasons why I'm mentioning this is because, we talk about risks and we talk about IT and, oh, what if the system goes down? Well, this is a real risk for Daystro. You have to have contingency plans. You have to have a backup plan. Since that time, we created systems like everyone's phone number is updated. You get alerts, sometimes just testing alerts that, a backup way of communicating. So you have to have very robust contingency plans when you're in this industry, because there are many companies that are dependent on you. So yeah, that's a real life example, Anju. I don't know if there's any questions on that.
Yeah, any questions, guys, on this real life example? Because I'm watching the chat as well as we go along, to see if there's got any, if you want to ask any questions around this, because I think it's a huge impact. So like you said, how do we prepare for it, right? So that's what is important, the preparation of it. So I would ask you please to put it in the chat box, if you don't mind, all your questions, because that will be very effective. I will read out your questions. It'll be great if you can do that. So I think first and foremost, we need to understand the opportunities that are there, but also the risks that are there, and then prepare for the risks. Am I right, Kashif? That's what you're very conscious of currently, and having those backups, working alongside your CIO. That's really important as well. And then funding those initiatives related to cyber, because that's the reason why we as finance professionals need to understand cybersecurity, the cyber risk, get educated in that part so that we are able to support and fund such initiatives. Have you seen a rise, an increase in such funding, Kashif?
Oh, sorry, which funding? Sorry, Anju, I missed that last part.
Cyber related funding.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, so I've experienced two main companies, right? So you have TNT, which was a European player mainly, $5 billion annually. And then we moved over to FedEx, which is huge. It's, $90 billion right now, close to $100 billion revenue. So, and one of the questions came in as well, how did we mitigate some such risks? So
Yes.
What I generally found was you do have to have very controlled IT environments. Like I mentioned, I think someone in one of the countries in one of the laptops installed an accounting software that had this virus. Now, unfortunately, you just cannot allow anyone to install any software. So what I've experienced in FedEx is they have very strong information security. I'm not able to install a software on my computer unless it's been improved by a full-fledged information security team which is based in India, and they review everything. So you just have to have very strong control. So it's almost like, well, you can't go away from IT systems. You have to have IT systems. There's no two ways about it. You just have to have a very strong control environment for the IT systems. But at the same time, you do have to prepare for the worst. So, for example, a good HR system with everyone's mobile number, a backup plan. So if the system went down, how quickly can you restore it? How quickly can you communicate with everybody? So all of this. So it's pre and post that you'd have to work on.
Great, thank you. So there is a question related to cyber insurance from one of the participants, Kashif. Any input on that?
Yeah, to be fair, I don't know much about that. I'm pretty sure maybe someone somewhere globally has been looking at cyber insurance, but we didn't get any benefit from it from a TNT perspective. We didn't
Right.
have it. We just had the loss.
Right. Okay. And also, I think, as the participant mentioned, it is evolving, right? That space is evolving. So there's a lot to look into as well. So there is another question from Faizan. What do you suggest, as per your experience, what backup measures Diastruct must put into place?
Yeah, to be fair, when I was reading through it, I didn't know, how much already they had. I mean, the comments that came through were that they do have a comprehensive IT system, and they do try and mitigate it. I think again, what I would say is to have a very controlled IT environment. That's the best way to limit the risk, and then at the same time have a solid contingency plan for when the worst happens. For me, these two would be the key to mitigate IT-related risks.
So we're looking at internal control in short, isn't it, Kashif?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we go back to our basics. Whatever the technology is, we're going back to our basics and talking about controls. And Matthew has written a message here. Sustainability is a very high profile global issue, particularly for logistics. What are FedEx's flagship sustainability programs? We'll come to sustainability, Matthew, and we'll talk about it. Um, then Ama asks, have you experienced any ransomware? And what are any steps to follow? I think when it comes to steps to follow, as Kashif mentioned, those controls, that's the
Yeah,
internal
maybe, and just one
controls.
thing. So the non-Petya virus was actually ransomware. So everyone had a black screen, and it was make a payment in Bitcoin to this code. So it was actually ransomware, but the company decided not to pay it. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then Jigger has mentioned, he's asked a question, is blockchain a probable solution to data and IT management? I would say not. So blockchain is not going to give you that solution, that silver bullet, because blockchain also has its issues, right? So it is a different kind of architecture, but certainly it's not going to give you a solution for cyber risks, what you're going to face. Okay, with that, I'm going to go into another area. So that is looking at measuring performance through KPIs, finance ops. So one of the things that we look at, the reason we are looking at the KPIs is, then first we are looking at what are the critical success factors that needs to be there for our organization. So to answer that, I'm going a step before that. I guess we'll start there. What is a strategy? What is a mission vision of Diastruct? And then looking at its strategy, and then look at, well, if these are the strategies, what are the control areas? What are the controls that we're going to put in place to make it successful? And this is where we're looking at, the controls and then the KPIs. Anything that you could talk about these areas? So strategy, some of the strategies that FedEx implemented and the KPIs that got linked to it, anything in that area?
Yeah, I think there's like quite broad those topics. So maybe we just let's focus on one of them, right? So let's think about strategy for
Yes.
Daystruck. So Daystruck is a domestic player. They do logistics, warehousing, inventory management, transportation, so the last mile, and they do some sea movements. So Daystruck, from what I understood, they want to grow. And the growth now, because they're already the largest player in Roundland, if they just stay in the country, they can really only effectively grow in two ways. Is in line with inflation, so the market is growing, they would grow, or you take away business from your competition. Now, the inflation growth is quite standard. It's not going to be anything huge, maybe 5, depending on the country you're in, the percentage. 2 to 10%, depending on the country. Taking market share away from your competition is a lot more difficult, especially if they're a good company as well. So these two strategies will not get you like those huge growth and return that they may be after. If they're looking for something more aggressive, the real way is international expansion. And I think one of the questions was, how do you expand internationally? So one of the things that companies like FedEx do, and again, I'm going back to my real life example. Now, if you think about it, now I'm based in Saudi Arabia. We have someone who wants to send something from Saudi Arabia to, I don't know, US. Now that's quite straightforward. We have a team in Saudi Arabia. We have a team in the US. We'll fly it to the US, we'll pick it up, take it to the airport, fly it. One of the FedEx staff would deliver it there. That's okay. But what about if someone wants to send it to, I don't know, Malawi or, Botswana, one of those countries where actually we don't have a presence. So 220 countries and territories where FedEx has direct presence in probably 70 of them, 70 or 80. So what that means is in all the other countries, we have to have an agreement with a local player that, look, we may send you a shipment, and if we do, you need to deliver it in that territory. And likewise, if you pick up something, we'll deliver it to the rest of the world. So that's a way that you can expand internationally. These are called like global service agreements, where you work with local players, you agree rates with them, which are preferential rates, but it allows you to provide a really good coverage. I'll give you an example, right? Daystruck may be managing a warehouse for Mercedes-Benz. Now, Mercedes will be importing from all over the world. Now, from my understanding, Daystruck has mainly the control in Roundland, but they don't have that in from the rest of the world because, parts come from different areas of the world. You may have to send things as well. So that's somewhere that they can really expand our field from a strategy perspective. Now, on the other hand, it could be the other way around as well. One of the big players, FedEx, TNT, supply chain, DHL supply chain, they could also decide to take over Daystruck. So, they're at risk of that as well, actually. Again, 22,000 employees is like 5% of what FedEx has today. It would not be it would be a big acquisition, but it wouldn't be like out of this world. So that's also a possibility as well that could happen. And I think these are all things that I'm saying that it's good to think about, because when you go up to the exam, any of these things can come up. So you almost got to be ready. Your mind's got to be ready to be able to tackle that as well if it comes up.
Thank you, Kashif. I think that's really great example, because it could be that acquisitions, isn't it? Or you might, and another question would be, well, we want to expand internationally. Why not acquire a company, right? In a different country that is a smaller player? And also another thing would be, well, why don't we work and have that global service agreement with them? So there are different things that we'll have to consider. And when you're considering, and at the exam, it's not one answer. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. It will be, well, in that situation, what has come up, right? And you would have to say, how would you evaluate? Should I acquire that company? Should I work with them? You will go through that suitability, acceptability, feasibility, and sustainability SAFS model to understand, well, shall I go ahead with this acquisition, or should I start working with them initially and then see whether the cultures work together very well? Because in most of the M&As, it doesn't work because of the culture. It's nothing else. So it is important to articulate it to your examiner as well. So we've got some questions here from a couple of people and in the audience. Kashif, if you don't mind answering.
Yeah, maybe let me tackle a few of them. So I think Ali Nehma, has your company been exposed to theft of trucks or ships, and how was it dealt with? So yeah, we have actually. So a lot of times we move. One of our customers is Samsung. So we had an instance where Samsung, right? So when they launched the new phone move it on truck in the Middle East. So from UAE to Saudi or Bahrain or Kuwait, and the trucks were stolen. So a lot of phones basically got stolen. But unfortunately, this happens. I mean, you can try and put a lot of controls in place. So, you vet your drivers. You will have tracking devices on your vehicles. You can also put like cameras in there as well. You can also seal your vehicles as well. Despite all of that, thefts do happen. And unfortunately, at that time, you just have to involve the police, allow them to investigate, and you have to have insurance as well. So all companies like FedEx, TNT, they have different types of insurances that cover this. So you almost do it both ways. So you as a company have to insure yourself against the loss, but at the same time, your customers, for Samsung, we would have given them the opportunity to buy insurance with us. So you have to do it both ways. So for example, Daystrom, they should, I mean, see, you would cover the basic, and there's, I think, rules around it. So logistic companies have to provide a certain amount. I can't remember what it is, but it might be like $2 a kilo or something. But sometimes it's not enough. For example, one of our customers in the Middle East is Louis Vuitton. Now, Louis Vuitton have very expensive items. Now, that's not enough for them. So we allow them to purchase extra insurance to cover their goods. So if something went lost, they can get the full money back from us. But now we don't want to be an insurance broker. We don't want to have that sort of risk on us. So we would make sure we have insurance to cover for it. And that's the best way that you can deal with the theft of trucks. So I hope, Ali, that answered your question. Let's look at this one from Stacey. If Daystrom offered more 4PL options. So again, my understanding 3PL to 4PL is more about the strategy. So with 3PL, you're already doing everything, but with 4PL, you're doing more, you're almost like doing a lot of the thinking as well for the 3PL provider, and then you work. It's an opportunity. I'll be honest with you, my personal experience isn't too much on the 4PL side, so I don't know what benefit it would have. I'm sure it's an opportunity for growth, but I'm probably not the best to speak on it, if I'm honest with you. I'm gonna go to, sorry, Angel, you want to say something there?
No, that's fine. Let's go to the next one.
What is the drawback of not acquiring and indeed make service agreement to perfect on behalf in countries that we don't exist? Yeah, that's a good question. So now, both, there are challenges, pros and cons to both. So if you do an acquisition, so TNT was acquired by FedEx in 2016. 7 years later, we still have TNT branded, TNT airway bills in existence. We still have TNT systems in existence. So it's taken over 7 years and we're still not integrated. So during that time, the competition really takes advantage. They'll always, come in, like DHL would come in and say, look, them two companies, they're going to be integrating for the next 5, 10 years. You're not going to get the service, so come with us. In the end, acquisition is going to be better because you'll be a bigger company, you'll acquire more customers, but you got to make sure that integration happens as quickly as possible. So I believe integration is a better thing to do. However, you can't integrate in you can't acquire in 220 countries and territories. So you have to have the service agreements. Now, the downside about the service agreement is that it's difficult to control quality. So I'll give you an example, right? FedEx is a global brand. You want to offer a FedEx global premium service. Now, how can you be sure that the driver in Malawi is dressed in the FedEx uniform? Yeah, you can tell them that they should be, but who verifies that? The vehicle should be FedEx branded. The warehouse should be clean. You shouldn't be treating employees unfairly. You shouldn't be bribing. Bribery is a big one, like the US anti-bribery laws. It's not just FedEx that can't offer a bribe. It's anyone that we work with cannot offer a bribe. So you lose control when you move to the global service agreements, and that's always the risk. So with acquisition, it's the time, but probably long-term it's better. And with global service agreement, you can do it faster, but the quality you have to make sure on.
I think that's a really great point that you emphasized, Kashif, because each one has its pros and cons, isn't it? There's no magic solution that we can give. So each one, as long as you provide that pros and cons to the examiner, it's important to articulate it very clearly so that it can the examiner understand that you have looked at multiple areas, because remember, you have only 60 minutes for to answer maybe two sections of a question, right? So you got to be quite quick in answering those questions. There are some other questions that have come up, Kashif.
Yeah, I just seen one from Aniru, bribery. See, I think it's a loaded question, Niru. Bribery is very much a need in logistics business. Now, when you say that, you can't talk like that when you're with FedEx, because bribery, if any of the large companies are accused of being involved or have given a bribe or anti-competitive, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of fines. And it's not a risk that a US company, so I'm talking about FedEx and UPS, would ever take. So what we would do is, if we know that, let's say, to be able to clear our shipments in Pakistan or any other country in Africa or somewhere else, that we have to offer a bribe, we just would not do it. We would not operate in that country. And it's as simple as that. So in no way, shape or form would a company like FedEx ever sort of say, yeah, we're going to pay a bribe. Now, that can sometimes have a detrimental impact on your service. So let's say a shipment comes in, instead of clearing immediately, maybe it gets held for 2 days or 3 days. We take that. That's fine. We would rather do it that way than find a shortcut. So multinational companies, like global companies like FedEx, they do not entertain anything like that. Now, and to be able to demonstrate this, we make all our employees sign off on an annual basis that you have not taken part in anything like this, you've received the training, and even any hints of it, you have to report. So yeah, very hot on anti-bribery measures in companies, global companies anyway.
That is a really good point, but anti-bribery, as well as there's another very big topic, which is talking about anti-slavery, isn't it? The Modern Slavery Act. It has come in most countries. So in the US, California, and then in Europe, then of course Australia, New Zealand is looking at it, Canada. So a lot of countries have implemented, launched this particular anti-slavery act, and with that, again, that the culture is important to. So the first thing is, what is that governance around it? Am I correct, Kashif? So bribery and all of these topics, how do you manage it from a strategic level? It is through governance and conformance. So the conformance is the policies and procedures. Like Kashif mentioned, you've got policies related to it. That is, every year you need to get your employees to sign off on something. So you're creating that culture within the company that this is not acceptable. We are not doing it. You're also getting that training that is required, which is quite important. Anything that you want to add there, Kashif?
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's a real life example, right? So I've received an email last week that by the end of this month, I have to complete my anti-corruption training. So that's a system that we've got. I'll log in. It's probably like an hour training, and I have to answer some questions at the end. And once I've done it, I'm certified. So we have a few that happen every year. So anti-corruption, so to make sure, things like bribery, etc. We also have anti-competition. We have to be very careful about the very strict anti-competition laws. So if me as FedEx representative and someone from DHL, maybe someone from Aramex, if we all go to an event together, we cannot even talk about pricing or anything like that. It's a no-go. And if those discussions come up, I have to leave and I have to report it. Now, I know that because I've been trained that through these courses. And if I do that, I'm okay. If I stay in that room, then I can be accused of being anti-competitive and therefore at risk of huge fines. So you have to have these compulsory trainings. You have to give it to all your employees. You have to get them to sign off on it as well. And then, like Anju mentioned, the culture as well. So once a year we have compliance week, and there all week you're told different things about how it's very important to be compliant. And yeah, so that's how we embed the culture of the organization.
The one question is from Jigar, mentions that one of Dicetrack's biggest disadvantage is even though we want to grow Kashif, we don't have that international experience. We have the aspiration to grow internationally, but we've never worked in that space. So we may lack the resources, as in maybe we have money, but we don't have the people with the necessary experience. That's a really good point, isn't it, Kashif?
Absolutely, yeah. You have to have the know-how. Domestic versus international is a totally different marketplace. You have to have specific expertise. Again, I'm here in Saudi Arabia. It's very difficult to open a bank account in Saudi Arabia as a company, especially as a foreign company. You have to go through various channels to be able to have your own bank account, to get a license. So you need those specialities. Also, as soon as you go into the international market, the most complicated aspect of logistics and transportation is always customs clearance. To be able to clear your shipments, you need specialists. For example, a liquid, to be able to clear liquids in countries, you require a different types of paperwork and approval versus, something like an iPhone. With an iPhone, you again need different types of approvals. You need to make sure it's genuine. Companies don't want fake products coming in. So in Saudi, we have something called Saber. Saber is like a certificate of authenticity that has to be acquired. So customs clearance is the biggest challenge, or the most complicated aspect of international. So absolutely, if they decide to go and expand internationally, probably my recommendation would be you have to create like a division, which is international, expansion, and you have to bring in those relevant experts with international experience. I'll probably apply for that job if that comes up. Anyone?
So we've got our finance directors here, the would-be finance directors. They will be interviewing you, Kashif. So I guess this is that interview. They're evaluating you with your experience. So here we go. So there are some other questions here. Would you like to take up those?
Yes, absolutely. So let's start off with Jigar mentioned that he cannot hear me, but I'm hoping that everyone else can hear me.
I can hear
and
you.
I think you can. Okay,
Yes.
That's good. So logistics depends on expansion over geographical areas. How do you manage translation impact? I'm assuming you're talking about currency. Now, again, with a multinational company, you have to choose a language, and that's your business language. So in FedEx, it's English. Whether you're in Poland, Singapore, Dubai, Saudi, wherever, English is our business language. So when we recruit, this is one of the requirements. You must be English speaking plus the local language. So that's good. How big is the automation in FedEx warehouse? And are they looking to automate warehouse vehicles, robots, drones, etc.? Absolutely. So I've got experience in FedEx in huge countries like the US and UK, and small countries as well, or small in comparison to FedEx. Now, the smaller you are, so when I go to one of the warehouses in Saudi Arabia, we're not very big. It's still decent, but not very big. Here we have very minimal automation. Unfortunately, a lot happens manually because there's not that much. But as soon as you go to some of your big warehouses in UK or your US, in Memphis, where our global hub is, there you cannot work without automation. So there are belts that are flying around very quickly, scanners that are scanning, there are trays that are tipping material. So you have to do that. So depending on how big you are, and I think the way Dicetrack is working, they've got a lot of warehouses and they are quite big. They would have to have some sort of automation in there. Now, robotics, we are trying robotics on processes as much as possible. And again, in warehouses, wherever we can. Autonomous vehicles. Now, FedEx did something recently called Roxo. Roxo was like a robot where you can put a parcel, it will take it from A to B. Personally speaking, I think we're a bit in its infancy at the moment. It's still like experimenting and testing and trials. However, if you don't do it now, you're going to miss the boat, kick in maybe 5-10 years later. So you do have to keep testing and finding a good way to do it, but I don't think anyone has nailed it yet. all you hear at the moment is a few news stories like Amazon's doing a trial or DHL did this. It's still very much in its infancy. So yes, you do that research, but don't rely on it immediately. That's going to be, I think, later. And you just tell me when to be
Yeah.
quiet.
So
I'll
then
keep
there
going
is
otherwise.
one question on lobbying. What
Yeah,
is the governance around lobbying? I think that's a really good one. Have you guys
yeah,
got
indeed.
any particular uh, policies around this as well?
Yeah, no, lobbying is allowed. You know, lobbying you can, particularly like a company like FedEx that has multinational experience, right? We try and work with the government to introduce different laws. So we do have a role in our company called a PRO, Public Relation Officer. And I'll give you one example, right? One of the things that we try and do is that before a shipment arrives in a country, we try and have that shipment already customs cleared, meaning all the paperwork is shown, the values, the duties are paid, so that when that shipment arrives, it just needs to be scanned by security and then it gets through. Now, that's a very efficient process, but not all countries allow it. So one of the things we do is we get our PROs to engage the relevant authorities in the country, customs or whoever it may be, and we encourage things like pre-clearance to be able to provide a better customer experience. So lobbying is a good way. Obviously, lobbying for legal things and things that will make the things better. And yeah, that's a norm.
I think with that, there's another good area that we can talk about is the ESG aspect, right?
Mm.
So again, looking at it from a governance perspective, embedding it from your strategy, downwards into your controls, etc. The importance of ESG even in funding. Yes, so there is a broad area that I've picked on. I think this links to Matthew's questions around ESG as well that he asked previously. And then Faizan has just asked another question around environment. So if you can give us an overview of, what your company is doing from an ESG point of view, the activities, the strategies, and then looking at DICE as well. What can we
Yeah,
do?
yeah, indeed. ESG, you have to do it. I mean, if you look at some of the news in the UK, where there were protests and Stop Oil, and Formula One was interrupted. So doing nothing, you're going to be subject to these sort of things, and you don't want that sort of business disruption. So, and it's the right thing to do as well, to be more active on ESG, right? So therefore, what we at FedEx, I'll give you an example, right? One of the things that we did in TNT maybe 15 years ago was we purchased 70 electric trucks. So these are battery powered. Unfortunately, at that time, the technology was not where it is today. And what we found was those trucks were most of the time being repaired. Batteries were dying or something didn't work. So maybe that was too soon. But I feel like now that technology is there. So FedEx has been acquiring more and more electric vehicles wherever possible. So we recently announced in India that we're going to be operating more electric vehicles. So the first thing that you have to do with ESG is you have to take action. All right, you got to purchase electric vehicles. You have to be more efficient. You have to look for more economical ways to do things. Now, the second thing that you do is you have to be reporting on that as well. So how much is your fuel usage? How much is your electricity usage on a monthly, yearly basis? So that you can then track, is it going up or is it going down? And then hopefully you can demonstrate that through the actions that you are taking. For example, sticking a simple thing like stickers next to your light switches, which is, it says, please turn it off, or last out, lights out, something like that. Something simple like that can help reduce your electricity usage. So you got to be able to demonstrate that the actions that you are taking are having an impact. And then two other things that I would mention, I think you have to have a net zero target. I think with FedEx with 2040, we want to be net zero from a carbon emission perspective. And then something quite creative that FedEx did. See, all these things take money, right? And you got to be able to raise that money. So FedEx, and I'd encourage you all to Google this, FedEx recently issued green bonds. And this was specifically for investing in ESG related improvements. So that was quite, I think, a good thing that FedEx did from an ESG perspective.
Thank you. So there is a really interesting article in FM magazine, April, right, 2023. So I encourage people to go through it because they talk exactly that about extra funding and the initiatives. How can you fund these different ways of funding it as well? So I think that article is very relevant for us, for our case study. And then there are some other questions here. Ali is asking, how is reverse shipping done?
Yeah, reverse shipping. It's actually quite a profitable business that a company should be supporting, but it is quite complicated as well because a lot of time reverse shipping is something didn't work and therefore you got to go and collect it again and then you got to take it back. The logistics companies that do this, they definitely pass it all back to their customer, not the consumer, but the business that works with them. So it's an additional service that's provided. And it's not really a loss for companies like FedEx. Whatever the charges are, we pass it back to the customer and they accept that. When they're selling, like when I do an online order, I'm buying something, but the company knows that there's a chance that I might return it. And yes, they will have to take that cost of return transportation. It's going to be cheaper than the other way around, but it's something that they have to build into their margins. So I hope, Ali, that answered your question. I'm going to go one more back to Faizan. From environment point of view, what do you think practically hydrogen vehicles are more relevant or electric vehicles? I'll be honest with you, Faizan, I think hydrogen vehicles are very new at this moment in time. I mean, I haven't seen an internal study that we've done at FedEx, hydrogen versus electric at the moment. I'm sure this is something that is being looked at. It's just, I don't know. What I would say is the challenge with electric vehicles is the range at this moment in time. We have trucks right now that move from UAE to Saudi Arabia, and they can be, 8 hours, 12 hours on the road. So this is the advantage of traditional diesel vehicles. You can go long distance, and when you run out, you can fuel up quite easily. Unfortunately, with electric vehicles, you don't have that. So really, where you can operate electric vehicles in a smaller geographical area, you can't do those long runs with those electric vehicles. Going to look at some more questions.
While you read that, just a note to some of the participants here is when you look at strategy level, I think most companies, the companies, they focus on doing initiatives, new things. They allocate some funds for that. Because I think one of the things Kashif mentioned is also, when TNT got into the electric vehicle, but it was ahead of time, right? But you have to. I was at an event this week, and that's related to fintech, Dubai fintech event. There are a lot of traditional banks that have got into e-commerce, metaverse, different areas, blockchain, right? The reason is because they say, well, if we don't get into these areas, we don't know what it is and we're going to miss it. And that's something Kashif mentioned very clearly, saying if we don't know, we don't get into it, we don't know about it, and then we are going to miss it completely. And the competitors have, taken over. Any comments on this, Kashif?
Exactly. You have to be ready for it and you have to be testing it and trialing it. Yes, it costs money as well, and you're probably not going to make money for a long time, but you have to be there to be able to take advantage. Again, let me maybe give a more relevant example. So e-commerce. Now, people talk about it. I've been in the industry for a long time, and it took me a long time to fully understand e-commerce. So what is e-commerce? E-commerce is I'll step back. What used to happen in the past, let's say a company like Adidas, right? Adidas would use a company like FedEx. They would ask us to come and go to their warehouse, the big warehouse distribution center, to pick up, I don't know, 10 pallets, and then deliver those 10 pallets, one each, to each of their stores that might be in different places, right? That was the traditional way. Now, people started doing online shopping. So now it's not 10 pallets going to 10 different stores. It's probably 5 pallets going to 10 different stores, but then 5 other pallets broken up going to consumers like you and me direct to our house. Now that that is it's different. It's not the same. You have to, I'll give you an example. Delivering to a business address is quite easy, right? They're normally open 9 to 5. You go there, you do a delivery, it's fine. People are often at work, or someone's not at home, or the address, or it's a building, you got to go up 20 floors. So e-commerce is a lot different. Also, customs clearance is different as well. And that's always a challenge. So one of the things that when I was looking at this case study for Daystruck, I thought this is something that they can get involved in. Now, how would Daystruck get involved? Let's say I'm in Roundland. I want to start a new business. I don't know. I want to sell wallets, for example. Yeah, leather wallets. So I import 10,000 leather wallets from wherever. Now I can keep them in my house, and then as I'm selling them on, I don't know, Amazon or eBay or wherever else, I just dispatch them, or I go to a company that can manage all that for me. Now, I think these are all new businesses that are coming up that want ease of life. They don't want the hassle of inventory management, dispatching, transportation. They want to do the selling, the selling is really what the skill is. So they could offer e-commerce logistics solutions, which is something that they could expand into. And I think it's a growing market as well. So that was just something I wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's really good, and that's something that Alibaba did as well, quite successfully, isn't it? At the beginning, they went from shop to shop. They had people going in physically and not talking about e-commerce or putting stuff online. What they did was said, well, can we help you to arrange your store? So while arranging that little store, they went on putting stuff online and said, hey, we've got this online now. It's easy for you. How about just going through, managing that website? Yeah. So that was an easy transition. So that's a really good opportunity that Dashrak has as well. And then you also have mentioned things related to risk, and that is currency risk, Kashif. I think that's an area that one of our participants here, they spoke about translation risk as well. And let's talk about the currency risk that you've experienced.
Yeah. So yeah, as soon as you deal with the different currencies, there is a lot of risks that come up. So I'm going to give a few live examples. So internationally, as soon as you move to international, you're relying on air. Fuel is always in dollars. So a lot of your costs would be in like a standard currency or your operating currency. But in that local country, it's all local. Now, we had an example in Turkey. I remember maybe, I don't know, a long time ago when Turkey's currency was devaluating, and we were constantly having to report losses because of the impact of that. And one of the potential ways around it is to offer your prices in a more stronger currency like the US dollar. So that's one way that, in some countries we have avoided currency risk, is that your prices are in USD. Another thing we had an experience of was in Egypt. So we had a good business over there. We would be collecting money, but then when it was time to send it back to the parent company, we were not able to take money out from Egypt. They had their own currency restrictions that you can't take money out. And it took a long time. And again, money being stuck somewhere is not useful. You want to make the best use of your capital. So that was another issue that we had. And that's something that, it's difficult to avoid. It's the way, it's macroeconomic situations beyond your control. So that's, it's difficult. A couple of things, I know we're at the end of the hour, but a couple of other things I want to mention, which may be quite relevant, especially in the recent years. fuel price going up so much, right? It was, I don't know, low as $40. It went up to like $100. Now, that's more cost for companies, logistic companies. One of our biggest expenses, fuel, whether it's on truck or it's on air. Now, a lot of companies like FedEx, DHL, they all have a surcharge, so pricing mechanism to be able to pass those charges back to the customer. So if fuel goes up, what the customer pays goes up. If fuel comes down, it actually comes down, and that's quite industry standard. That's the norm. Now we've seen something new happen recently, which is shortage of truck drivers in Europe or shortage of laborers in the US and other places. So what that's meant is we've actually had to pay additional to staff to be able to work for us. Unfortunately, there wasn't a surcharge that was in existence for something like this. Now, arguably, there should be a surcharge. So, because fuel fluctuates and we're used to it, we would have a surcharge, but shortage of drivers and labor shortages, we don't normally have that. So one of the recommendations for Daystar could be to have a more dynamic pricing model, definitely for fuel, but maybe for other contingencies as well. And that would then, protect them when issues happen.
Correct. I think Dastruck being in Roundland, which is a developed economy, they will face similar kind of issues that the developed economies are facing currently, which is labor shortage. And I know for a fact in Australia that the truck drivers are earning huge money. So a lot of people are giving up their other jobs and saying, well, I want to be a truck driver, right? And they go on to be a truck driver, and they've got, there are very good rules, regulations, support as well for truck drivers. And then, of course, the salaries are quite high. So that's something else to consider. And there are some other questions here, Kashif, if you don't mind answering. Ali has asked a question.
Yeah, how often do the board meet and assess new risks and put a mitigation plan in place? Is it done when a new risk comes up at other companies? Yeah, so maybe first question, how often do the board meet? So in company like FedEx, which is huge, you meet very often, at least weekly, definitely monthly. And what often happens is you meet in different forums as well. So you may have a general board meeting, once a month, an official one. Then you would have a weekly type of catch up. Then you may have a monthly customer experience. You may have a monthly operational issues. So there are various meetings that would take place. And as you go up, they would have similar things. So very often is how often the company would meet on, but officially, I think, probably monthly is like the norm, where you'd like minute your meetings and all your actions, etc. Is it done when a new risk comes up? No, so we don't really wait. It's more dynamic than that. You're constantly evaluating new risks. I'll give you an example. You look at the news and you hear about a new legislation. Immediately, it's a risk that may impact you. So you bring everyone together at the next opportunity and discuss it. You don't wait for the board meeting.
Yeah. And something with regards to our business in logistics is very much a people business. So would you like to elaborate on this? Because we do have quite a number of people in our own business. We are just in the local space and we got 20,000 people, right? So imagine when we are going into the international space, we will have many more. So it is so much people's business. What can you think of, from a policy perspective, from a strategy perspective, the risk, and then of course, health and well-being, and again, it's going to get linked to that social aspect and the governance.
Yeah, indeed. This sort of industry, transport, logistics, it's heavily people dependent. You need your people. They're involved in all aspects of the supply chain and logistics, and truck drivers and laborers and accountants. It's all people driven. So you have to have a conscious effort to be able to retain your talent, attract talent, keep them on, growth. So how does company like FedEx FedEx or TNT do it? Well, you have to have, it's got to be embedded in your culture. So I'll give you an example of FedEx, they have a policy which is PSP, People, Service, Profit. Very simple, but everything that FedEx does, so every month when I give an update to my leadership, I give 3 updates. What's happening with the people, what's happening with service, what's happening with profit. And that way, you're always constantly having to think about people. So, and then you have to keep doing that. Your culture has to be there, you can't just like talk about it. So we've just launched a new culture, which is all about taking care of each other, rewarding and recognition. It's you have to have a conscious effort when it comes to people. Now, I wouldn't say there's one right answer, like you have to do it this way. For me, as long as you're thinking about people and doing things for their benefit, then I think that's good. But I think I've seen companies do many different things: annual function or monthly recognition, employee of the month. There's so many different ways you can reward. The most important thing is that you have to have a conscious effort to do it, not just a side thing.
And that leads to a very nice question about AI and, AI replacing humans. What are your views on this?
When AI is taking over humans, how much do you believe people expertise would be required for logistics? Okay, maybe again, I'm in the thick of it at this moment in time. I haven't seen AIs taking over human yet. However, I have seen. See, what normally happens is if you're doing 100 things, you can maybe get 5 of those things to happen in an automated way, or 10 of those things. But you still got to do the other 90, or you can do those 90 things better than you were before. So what I found is that we haven't really lost people to AI. We've been able to enhance what we've done with AI. That's what's happening right now. Now, whether that changes in the next 5 years, 10 years, maybe, probably. But at this moment in time, I haven't really seen that. So when AI is taking over, I think it's to be determined based on my understanding. It's to be determined, yeah.
Just to add something to that, I think if you look at even in the warehouse space, there's a lot of humans that are employed and they are doing repetitive work, hard work. So the advantage would be if you're able to have robots doing that type of work, you will eliminate that, the human, suffering at the end of the day. And when you're younger, that's fine, you can take it up. But as you get older, it becomes very difficult. So then there is a mental health, the health and well-being aspect that we need to look at. But then again, the human will be skilled. And like what Kashif mentioned, that conscious effort to build in different types of skill sets, isn't it? And that is where the company will be focusing on reskilling people for different types of jobs. And like the World Economic Forum or McKinsey, they have mentioned in their research, we're going to experience X number of people are going to lose, millions are going to lose their jobs. But of course, new jobs are coming our way as well. So you need to be reskilled for those type of new jobs. So I think we are, as we mentioned, we are on top of the hour now. So with that, I would like to thank Kashif for spending your time, not only presenting, but also you did a lot of research, reviewing the case study, etc. And of course, to all of you who are here patiently listening to us and also participating and asking the relevant questions. And I know some of you will be watching the recordings. So all the very best, whether you're doing the exam this session or in August, all the very best. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and good luck with your exams. I know I've been through it. I can imagine it being not the easiest thing. Maybe I think the best I had when I did this exam was try and make it easy for your marker to give you the exam, to give you marks. So as well as the content, just focus on your layouts and, you know, paragraphs to make it easy for them to give you the marks when necessary. And I found, you know, I really enjoyed that aspect of the exam, how to get the marks. Content is important, but also, you know, make it easy for them. So good luck. I hope it all goes well, and best wishes from my side.
Thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe. Bye-bye.